When you take two pieces of music and put them together, you get something totally new, which sometimes, surprisingly, can sound even better than what you just had from the beginning. A few months ago, we launched this concept in Sweden. And it's not about mixing two pieces of music together, it's about mixing different perspectives. Because we need to consider politics, ethics, what the future will look like. We speak with futurists, we speak about philosophers, we speak with so many different perspectives, and we need to choose what to listen to and then take action on that. Looking at different perspectives. Today we have invited 4 guests with very different perspectives, and we will have a Mashup seminar.
You are, among other things, a futurist, and what does that mean?
It means that I'm very curious about the future that's ahead of us, and I'm trying to predict what's ahead of us and how we can use that insight to build better companies now. Yeah. I think when being an entrepreneur, what I'm trying to do all the time is to plan for the waves that are about to come. And when I succeed in that, the company will be successful. But it's like the Wayne Gretzky thing about like skating to where the puck is going to be. And then it's very much like sometimes you get that hit and sometimes you're off to somewhere else. But the last 2 companies we have been very successful in like feeling something is about to happen in this area, building something for that area, and then life is much happier for us.
So, why did you choose to come here? What was it to participate here today?
Well, in my field as having studied philosophy, having my graduate degree in that, and ethics is a specific area of interest of mine, and also the area of especially genetics is something that is very prominent in Jewish circles, for a reason that I'm hopefully going to go into a little more later on during our discussion. It's something that is very widely debated in Jewish circles.
The CRISPR technology is a method to change the genetic material inside living cells in a way that we have never been able to do before.
So you go actually into the cell,
yeah,
in a living body, or is it
you can
take out the cells?
Both in cells that we grow in a petri dish, or
yes,
you can also go into a living animal or a plant and change the genetic material inside that cells in that living, breathing organism.
And that will then lead to
whatever you would like to change. that is the essence of that organism. We can make whatever change we like, and we know how to make it. You call your blog on the blog portal for Facebook for cancer. What do you hope to achieve with that one?
Well, Facebook for Cancer is basically just to make it easy for people to understand what we're building. So we're building a social platform for survivors, patients, and loved ones. And our focus lies on mental health, boosting the mental health, as well as patient data collaboration and storytelling. But yeah, Facebook for Cancer makes it very, I think, easy for people to kind of imagine what we're building.
So Rebecca, coming back to the NASA Google program that you recently attended, did you discuss this genetic modification in humans or designer babies?
Yes, a lot. We had these like debate nights on genetically modified babies. Like, you're for, you're against, now debate, yeah.
And what was the debate? Can you tell us more about it?
So, first in the night everyone was against, like the trend is here too, but then it becomes, like in the end it became more and more like, okay, so if you're choosing not to upgrade your kid, but the rest of your kids' friends are upgraded,
1.2.
and they are starting to bully your kid for being less intelligent, they can't, they will get sick much sooner, they will not be able to get a job, like how could you how could you not upgrade? Like, what would the ethical, like, it was like flipped, the ethical debate was flipped around totally. So that was very
want to have
disturbing.
that date,
And
more or less.
don't know, but it was definitely shifting. Then, of course, and this was very interesting at Singularity University, we were 90 scientists and entrepreneurs from 90 countries. And when it comes to GMO in general, and also it's like it's these different schools. Like you have the American school that it's much more like the kids of our lecturers are like 8 years old and they are changing genes in the garage. Like it's no big deal. They are 8, like 8. And the attitude is all the time like, what could possibly go wrong? And then I have a much more of a sustainability background where we see all living organisms like living ecosystems, and you know that if you change, like if you take 8 wolves out of Yellowstone National Parks or reintegrate them, like the shape of the river changes after 10 years by like 8 animals. So and you had this whole wide spectrum in the classroom, 24/7, 12 weeks, just like banging every breakfast, lunch, dinner, all the lectures and so on. So yes, it was a very lively discussion, and I think it's so important to discuss those topics, but also to realize that the people who are moving the science forward, they can do it. Yeah. Like it's not them who are gonna say, oh, maybe we should step back. Someone else needs to do that. So
it's more
like,
ethical then.
Yeah, it must be like a societal discussion, and it's also political discussion. Citizens needs to be involved in that discussion, and it's happening now.
Yeah. So we'll have it in the future.
Yes.
Yeah. So as a comment on that. So this is really the problem between having an individual choose and a community, a society deciding what's best. For I'm pretty sure if there was no regulation and no discussion in society, this is exactly what would happen. You would care and you try to provide the best for your child, but even though you will feed into a system that will be worse for everybody, because it will be a continuing spiral of just limited tolerance for diversity and acceptance of difference between people. So if this would be, it's a very dangerous path to move upon. So that's why we must, as a society discuss these issues and try to inform of the dangers of having a development towards this direction. We don't need better humans, we need a more accepting society.
So, Fabian, with this new technique, it's probably soon possible to actually cure completely or even prevent cancer. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think it's great.
Yes.
I think anything, when it comes to modifying genes, I think it's first of all, you need to draw a baseline between what can be done and what cannot be done. And when it comes to getting rid of deadly diseases or even not deadly diseases, just diseases that will be a trouble for the individual as well as society as a whole, I think that's a given. I think it's, as long as we know that there are no other consequences than just getting rid of the disease, I think it should be always implemented. And of course, it would be great to get rid of cancer for the future generations. But yeah, when it comes to, I guess, designing babies or designing people, I think it becomes tricky because, first of all, I don't think we really know what is the ideal baby, really, to be honest? If you make someone more intelligent, how can we know that that's the ideal situation for a person? If I'm intelligent, if I would raise the intelligence of my baby, then perhaps that baby would get really bored in school and then perhaps go to take some drugs or something else. There's always risks when you start alternative. And that's why I think it's very risky to start designing, but definitely a baseline for diseases and things like that, I think is just definitely a green light for me.
Yeah, the question is, what is a perfect human being?
Exactly.
Yeah. What's the definition?
And also, what if someone wants to design his baby to look like a cat or something? I mean, insane. I mean, there are those risks as well.
Of course.
Someone that just wants to have a little doll, or I mean,
It's okay if people do that when they're grown up, because that happens, with tattoos and everything.
Totally.
That's a different situation.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important also to separate these two things, that you can use gene technology as a treatment for patients, and that will, and this is developed really quickly, and that's something we definitely will see. But it's a big difference between that, because those modifications will not be inherited by their children, and modifying embryos to make genetically modified humans is a completely different thing. It's like changing a human to changing the soul. And these are very, very different things. And it's very important to keep in mind.
Thank you for that.
Oot,
Yes.
I think this video describes human playing God. What's your reflection on this one?
The specific video actually does, yes, I agree. But to some extent, we are considered to be partners with God, because in our tradition, in many religious traditions, the view is that the body does not belong to us. The body belongs to God. It's given to us. We have the right to use it during our lifetime. It's a little bit like, that's actually a difference to secular or humanist conception, where you say, it's my body, I can do with it whatever I like. In the religious traditions, it's an agreement. You could compare it to a fair use agreement, if you want to use legal terminology, right? Yeah. There are certain conditions that you have to fulfill in order to be able to hand back the body afterwards. Now, what is considered fair use depends very much in the risk analysis. What is a society ready to accept, right? If you look, for instance, if you get out in the morning, the number one source of violent premature deaths is traffic accidents, right? Every single time you step into traffic, every single time you get into a car, you're putting your life at risk. So theoretically, you could say, you should never, ever put yourself in a situation like that, because it endangers your life. Yeah. And yet, this is an accepted risk in society, and we are all ready to do that, and that's why it falls under the fair use agreement, right? Even with God. Okay. So that right we have. Yeah. But. Right, there is a limit to it. Do we have the right to alter our bodies to an extent that prevents us from developing into the beings that we are supposed to be? Do we even have the right to prevent human beings from coming into life by genetically modifying, or if you use the PGD, by using methods in order we select certain embryos and others you just let it disintegrate? Yeah. It's a different to the PND, the prenatal diagnostics, where you simply make an assumption, where you simply screen the parents to make sure that there are no lethal diseases in the family. And that is why I said before, that is something that is widely debated in Jewish circles, because the Jewish minority, the Jewish ethnic minority, has a very high risk for a good number of genetic diseases. If you afterwards, go outside, punch into Google or your favorite search engine, just punch in genetic disease in Jewish, and the first hits that come up is Tay-Sachs, is familial dysautonomia, is Gaucher, and so on and so on and so on. So that's why routinely in North America and in Israel, adult Jews are routinely screened for 10 to 15 of the most common genetic diseases.
Some sort of way you're doing it already.
In a way, yes, yeah. But it's different, because here you are actually screening the parents, yeah. And then, for instance, in the case of Tay-Sachs, I think it was in the 1970s when the test for Tay-Sachs came. And what happened then, it was a call to arms by rabbis, by educators, by medical professionals, and it probably does not come as a surprise for you that there are quite a few Jews in the medical profession and in research. I even met at least one here, and I'm sure there are more. And the screening of the entire adult Jewish population in North America and in Israel led to that within one generation, Tay-Sachs is no longer an issue in the Jewish community. The other thing is then, if you have the AFD testing, right, where you test the fluid, the embryonic fluid, then if you discover that the embryo is affected with, for instance, Tay-Sachs, right, then the parents have to make the decision whether or not to abort. And that has its own set of ethical challenges, because I'm talking abortion. Abortion is not taken lightly in the Jewish tradition, although it is possible. Especially if you say, that the life of the mother is at stake, and the life and health of the mother is here very, very generously defined. Because in the Jewish tradition, there is the embryo is seen as something that is under development from time of gestation and then through the pregnancy. The embryo receives a different status legally, although it is not considered fully life until it actually has emerged. The body of the fetus has emerged. First then it is considered life as much as the mother's life. So before that, it can actually be aborted, and that's why abortion in the Jewish tradition is possible.
So by that, this is something that could happen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
We have a question that is sort of related to this from the audience, and we have all agreed that there is a big difference between designing perfect babies and taking away genetic diseases. But how can we use this knowledge without misusing it? Maybe you want to start, Rebecca.
It's really hard to know, and that comes back to if you're changing a whole system and you don't know. We were talking before, and I think you said it brilliantly. The human body is like a big pack of rubber bands. It's not like we have built our body cell by cell up, and we can take those away, or we can switch a little bit here. But you are it's a living system, so we don't really know. You pull a trigger somewhere, and you don't know what else that will change. So that is. Can we ever know that? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's incredibly important to point out the fabulous complexity of living organisms, and that they are completely alien to any sort of how an engineer would design things. The lack of modularity, for one thing. You can't change one thing without changing something else. But it's interesting to look into other powerful technologies. You mentioned pre-implantation genetic diagnostics, the PGD, where you have parents, typically they have lost a child to a genetic disease that they were carrying but were not aware of. And then they can have a second pregnancy, and they can select an embryo lacking this disease and proceed. So of course you could in principle do that for any sort of trait. You could select embryos for any trait you would like that you're carrying that you would think would be beneficial. But the use of this has been very restrictive for very severe diseases. So I think it's encouraging to see that we can have a very powerful genetics tool that is used, at least currently, in a wise manner.
So, Magnus, would you say, using this new DNA sister technique, we were talking about that earlier on, that it's good if you can actually use it for diseases, but not for designing babies.
Right.
So is that something that's, you mentioned it, but you think that will grow? The use of it to distinguish disease?
Right. So again, it's the difference between a treatment of a somatic review. I treat my body, and the change would not be inherited. I think we will see that. Then it's much more straightforward to make this risk-benefit, calculation. For making a genetic modification that will be passed on, and I will have a person formed from a genetic modification, it's much harder to make that estimation of the benefit versus risk, because you don't know that person is going to be having genes from other persons coming in and changing the picture. It's just, again, a very complex thing. That's it's going to be very important to consider.
Yes.
I think it's also important to keep in mind that, yes, we are discovering more and more about the connection between certain genes and certain diseases, character traits, or whatever. But we also, at the same time, also more and more realize that just because there's a certain genotype, it doesn't mean it results in a certain phenotype. These two things do not correspond necessarily. And also, attitudes change. You know, I don't even want to go back to the Nazi eugenics and the forced sterilization of unwanted social groups even with, in Swedish society, it happened. Yeah? But let's keep in mind what we considered 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago as people being severely handicapped. We no longer see them like that. Mm. A person with Down syndrome is no longer considered to be having less of a quality of life. Mm. A person with who is a deaf mute or is born blind, they themselves today would very much disagree if we would describe them as handicapped. Mm. So if we start down that road, where is the limit? And that is exactly where ethics come in, because and that's where religion and ethics overlap. We are, the devil's advocate, even it's a little funny to say that for the religious, but that's exactly what we are. We are the ones who are saying, wait, stand back, let's think. We have to look at the bigger picture. There's a huge difference. The ethical implications to the ethical question between P&D, PGD, or genetic engineering are completely different questions. Every single one of them has their own sets of challenges.
Mm. So who will make the decisions in the future, do you think, regarding what's accepted and not accepted?
Well, it shouldn't be done by Paul in Aftonbladet. Without honking my own horn here, but I really think this is, besides a scientific question, this is a deeply ethical problem, and it needs to be debated by ethicists and philosophers, and theologians for that matter. Yes.
Does it happen today, would you say?
It could be done more. There are certain countries that are a little bit more on the edge of that, but I think, yes, we should do it. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to have an influence from the patients, or we might see them as patients, but they might not even see themselves as patients. Is this an actual condition that we would like to change? I might say that I would be horrified by the concept of being blind, but many people who are blind are perfectly fine and just as happy as everybody else. So is that a disease, or is it just a variety? So this, we have to expand the concept of we should be treating, and it should not be decided by some sort of standard of how we think a healthy human should be, but actually by talking to the people that having this, diseases or varieties of being a human, and see what they think about modifying that.
Agreed. Did you have a question?
Yes, I think we have got the answer from Ut, but I think it would be interesting to hear from a scientific perspective also, since we know that the life begins at day 14 in Sweden. What's your opinion when life starts, and when do we become a human?
I would say probably later, but it's good to be on the safe side.
Okay. But if you're not on the safe side, then
when you start having cognition, then I would say then you're in a long way on towards becoming a human. So there are certain physiological changes that makes it be changing from just a passive tissue to actually being an organism that is self-aware.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much for interacting and contributing to this debate. And as we all have listened to, we have discussed exciting and complex technologies that in the future could help us in order to prevent diseases, prolong life, and maybe modify crops. Let's see what happens. And it seems it's not too far away to become a reality, actually, that we can modify genetically not only plants but also human beings and and maybe try to prevent diseases instead of treating them. And even though many questions have been answered, many has also arisen. I mean, there's many new questions after this kind of debate. And I think this is often the situation when we discuss ethical aspects, that you just start to think and you realize that there's so many questions and who's going to answer these questions. So hopefully we will have room for more debates in the future. And I would like, again, just to thank you, and I think we should give you a big applause, and also the audience.